Good morning, folks. It's Y2K today, saying hello to you on my way to work. How are all of you today? I hope you're all doing well. It's the 20th of May, 2026, Wednesday, 7:29 a.m. in the morning, and you're joining me as I head to work. So today's subject, I actually we have, as you've been joining me, we've been talking about scams and everything. In focusing in Singapore, as apparently Singapore has one of the highest number of scams, uh, I believe, for Southeast Asia. Now, in terms of, let's just be more focused and talk about how one of the preventive measures I was thinking about that could actually help. Now, this YouTube video also is to go out to not just the um, victims and the elderly, the vulnerable, or any of you out there who have been scammed. But in your own way, I hope someday that, even the lawmakers, the most important people are the politicians and the lawmakers that make the Money Lending Act of 2008. That document and that law is in need of a dire upgrade. Okay, and when I said upgrade, I really mean like going through every single step of the document itself, the act, and then changing it, and especially when it comes to statutes and laws. And there's, the why. You could ask the question, why am I so motivated now to talk about the act itself? Because the one thing with the family members going through a scam and the money lending is that, especially for the vulnerable and the elderly, the scammers have already worked their way into the mind of the victim. And the victim at this point, they're desperate. And when they're desperate and they're so believing in everything that's going to come through, they're going to make the money, they're going to get the chance to, earn what they invested, quote unquote, or they have already given money to the scammer. They're hoping to get it back. And the point of scams, as I always say, is that the money that you pump in. It's going to get more and more. It's going to be more. It's going to be very aggressive. It's going to be more, and the scammer is going to be like pushing, using these psychological games on the elderly. Now, of course, in the recent times, there have been quite a number of suicide cases in Singapore. Now, of course, I know this is a touchy subject in Singapore, but every day somewhere around the world, I'm sure someone has taken their life, and that is just terrible, and that's just very sad to know. But there could have been more. There could have been better measures that could have been done, to protect the vulnerable and the elderly. You see the point of it. What is a law and an act if it's not going to be there to defend you, as a citizen, and to defend you as a victim, or to defend yourselves, as citizens, or taxpayers, or as people. When you live in a country, you pay your taxes. The law and statutes are established. The very baseline minimum is that these laws and acts should be there to protect your interests, but not just your interests, protect your life. And the sad part of it is, I've been attending some meetings with a family member who's going through a scam and all those things with legal firms and all this. And you finally realize how helpless victims are, okay? From the point when the victims reported this to the authorities, e.g. the police, but when it gets to the civil stage, the police will actually tell the victim, look, I'm sorry, we cannot take it from here. You have to seek your own legal advice. It's always been like that. Seek your own legal advice. And the problem with just seeking your own legal advice is that the victim is already so broken. There is more that could have been done for the authorities. You can't expect the victims to go do their own, Nancy Drew or the Hardy Boys kind of thing, and to go and find evidence, or to go and find proof that they were scammed, or to go and hunt down the bank accounts of these scammers, because they don't have the means. The victims don't have the means. They don't have the authority to do this. And so, in essence, when acts and laws are being created, there needs to be more protection, more investigative powers, so that more security powers to the enforcement agencies, the law enforcement agencies, to protect our citizens and our vulnerable people. And regardless of it, especially for the Money Lending Act, let me get straight to the point. One of the few criteria that all money lenders, all right, especially those who are licensed, all right, they should really have a part of it where they do a background check or means testing before a loan is conducted. Let me repeat that again. There should be a background check on the borrower to make sure that they actually have the means to pay the loan. All right? Now, of course, some of you who have been in the finance line for so long, you said, well, yeah, they've got a car, they've got a house, there's collateral, we can use that as collateral. Yes, but it's not cash on hand. It's not cash on hand. It's not cash in a bank. You see? And the key part of it is if it's an elderly person, okay? And if they were scammed and now you're asking them, oh, we need you to give up your house. That's the only thing they have. That's the roof over their head. That's the only basic thing they have. Nothing more. They've got nothing. Once you take it all, they have nothing. They're homeless. So if the elderly was under the impression of a very big, deep scam, right? Financial scam, investment scam, Bitcoin or love scam, right? The problem is that the scammers have already worked out the vulnerabilities and the weaknesses on the mental front with the victims. So that means that the buttons that the scammers are going to be pushing, they know the right buttons they're going to push. You know what they're going to do? For example, those people who have actually invested money in Bitcoin or something, they're going to show on some app, okay, or like the Trust app or something, all right? And they're going to show that, oh, you put your money, it's there. Don't worry, your money is there. But is it there or not? It's all digitized, And the worst part about what I hate about digitization, okay, I think, is that digitization AI, Singapore in particular, is trying to adopt AI at a very geometric rate. Okay, they want it to be quick, they want it to be fast because they want, progress to bada bing, bada boom, get in there quickly, and be on par with countries like China, for example, who have been using AI for some time and are accelerating the AI plans and everything. Now, I know that there was a famous comedian, Kumar. He's an amazing comedian, a local comedian in Singapore, Kumar. He's awesome, he's amazing. He had an interview with and a YouTuber who does a lot of great interviews as well, Max Chanov. I think that's his name. So the key part of it that Kumar said was he was making, for example, a comparison that Singapore is trying to compare itself to China, but it's not comparing like with like. And the dynamics of both countries are very different. We're very multicultural, while China is purely Chinese, right? I'm not saying that China isn't multicultural, but in terms of the percentage of multiculturalism, Singapore has more multiculturalism in the aspects of different races, nationalities, and ethnic groups than China. So with all this digitization, this AI and all these things, right, it's only going to bring more trouble. We've opened Pandora's box, right? The problem is you want to open Pandora's box, you better have a big sandbox and multiple layers of protection so that you can actually get yourselves, to onboard AI. The thing about people is that we think we're onboarding AI. No, AI is onboarding us into the system. It's going to be the other way around, all right? Now let's circle back to the Money Lending Act. So the few things that the Money Lending Act has to change, okay? Number one, there needs to be a means testing in terms of the income status and the credit bureau check and the credit report on the borrower to make sure they actually have cash in hand, they're employed, and they're able to pay off the loans. But the key part of it is that the shocking part was when I was attending a meeting yesterday with the family member and with lawyers. The system, the act itself, is designed purely for business, right? Now, some people say, yeah, but I'm a licensed money lending. I'm doing everything legit and on board. I'm not breaking any laws. Well, you're not if you're not doing to do the due diligence. Okay, the word due diligence to make sure that for example, the elderly person or maybe the young person who's a teenager or something would let me get to the teenager part in a moment. Is that you need to make sure that they actually have money to pay the loans off. They actually have a job to pay the loans off. They actually, it's not to say, oh, I'm going to look at their assets. Well, assets is something that it's so-called, it's there, but in terms of whether you can sell the assets or not, it's a different story, right? And if you're going to take someone's house and say, oh, that's collateral, well, that's not very, very ethically right, isn't it? Well, of course, any of us who are watching this YouTube now, we are blessed. We have a roof over our head. The most basic fundamental thing is shelter. Food, shelter, protection. And in this current day and age, job security as well. But the key part is that we need, the lawmakers in Singapore, if you're listening, if you're reading this, or you're hearing this, all right, make changes to the Money Lending Act of 2008, all right? Now, some people say, well, that's not good for business. Well, I didn't know business also, I'm not, if I was a money lender, I would do the due diligence 2-3 times to make sure that the person who's borrowing money actually has the capacity to pay. And I would make sure if it's an elderly person, the elderly person needs to have family around, or at the very least, someone they can trust and vouch, all right? Like a lawyer that has been helping them over, for a long time. This is helping them with their lasting powers of attorney. There should be someone to accompany the elderly, the vulnerable, and I did talk about teenager previously. So money lending companies should think about this question with common sense and logic, okay? Would you lend $1 million to a teenager? He comes with you a proposal with a business plan. He wants to buy this, or he can make a few $100,000, in a month. Okay, and he says he can start repaying the loans when he gets it. But if you're the one who's listening to it, money lending companies, all right, need to start to be smarter. You need to be also more wiser about it, all right, because even so for credit card companies too, money lending companies. The key part of it is doing business with ethics, morals, and principles. What kind of business are you running if you're not running it with some kind of principle, with some kind of moral and ethics? Right? It's the same as you're a weapons maker and say, oh, I'm just making weapons just to sell them and make money. Sure, you're making lots of money, but your weapons are going overseas to kill someone, to kill innocent children and women. Does that thought comfort you? That your weapons that you built are being used to kill someone. And now that only applies, with a very cavalier attitude to the manufacturers and to people who make money or who are actually making a big buck off all of these, like weapon sales and all these things. And say, oh, it's not my problem because you know what, I'm just making money. It will be your problem when that weapon is used against you. Okay, that bomb or that gun or something is being used against you, and your own loved ones get hurt. Then it starts to be a subject, isn't it? It only becomes a matter of subject when our own loved ones, the people we care about, we love, are hurt by the very weapons. Some choose to say, oh, we built them to defend freedom. We built them to instill fear. We built them to be the biggest boy or the biggest man in the yard with a stick. The key part of it is that you're not going places with this. You're building a world of emptiness when it comes to that. So when towards morals, ethics, and values, and there is none of that in this day and age because everybody is so hyped up on the next AP watch. That Swatch came out, the AP watch. Those of you have been keeping the news. People are more concerned about that. They're rushing, they're willing to throw money at it. But you know what? When we talk about, feeding hungry children or trying to build more infrastructure. Oh, everybody's so tight-zipped about their wallets. Yes, times are hard. And this is even the worst period of time because there'll be more scams coming along. It's not going to stop here, ladies and gentlemen, folks. It's going to get worse. And what's the point of building laws and acts if they're not going to properly defend the vulnerable? And people and lawyers and police officers just say, well, that's the law and that's how it is. Well, it's interesting because you build a law that doesn't really actually help. It's just more like a formality. And let me repeat that word, it's a formality. It doesn't really stick out. It doesn't really come and say, you know what? It's been designed to make sure that the borrower is protected. Yes. On the other front, people can say, how about us business people? How about us licensed money lending? Or we have money we have to lend out and all these things. Well, in the first place, before you lend the money out, do your homework, do your checks on the person, and actually interview the person to make sure that they know what they're doing. And if they are alone, they're vulnerable, they should have people who can prove that they're family, or they should have people who can prove that they represent these people. They're from law firms, who have years of experience with their client, not 5 minutes, not a few days. It should be a long-term, then loans can happen. Now, obviously, this also should apply to banking institutions, money lending companies, licensed money lending companies. There should be more rules and regulations to it. All right. I don't really like the whole idea, but it's just business. Well, it's very comfortable. It's very cavalier to say it's just business. Well, it's all right. It's just business. It's just business when people get shot dead by guns that you make, right? It's just business when you destroy families, and you don't even want to consider what happened. You just want to take their homes because they took a loan. It's just business because some, young, promising, inspiring entrepreneur tries his hand at something and his business fails. Well, things happen. Business do fail. And the key part of it is that there should be more checks. There should be three rounds of signing off, 3 rounds at bare minimum of signing off, right? It talks about, we're going to be, looking towards this, we're going to make sure that you can pay. Yes, because you don't want to waste more money to chase after the people who owe you money. And you don't want to waste more time, getting debtors to chase after the people who owe you money. So at the end of the day, you need to make sure that your people you're lending money to have the capacity to pay you. Mental capacity, financial capacity, even physical capacity. Because if they're not able to work, how are they going to have the loan? I'm not saying that you can't give the loan, but the key part of it is that if from the beginning the loan was structured in a way that the collateral was the house. Now, I don't think I want to do a loan like that because it's just morally wrong. It's ethically wrong. Because we are, what happens? Most people don't talk about what if, the what if factor. What if the elderly person suddenly doesn't have enough money to pay up? They lose their jobs. In this day and age, people are losing jobs, right? They're taking loans to buy things. Now, of course, there's a legitimacy of the loan, okay? If the elderly or the vulnerable is being scammed, right, they will be in this state of mind of absolute urgency and they want to get the loan because they need to get their money back. Now, it doesn't matter how they get they're going to look at the loan from money lenders, from banks, from credit cards, using balance transfers to get more money, to pay it to the scammer. The scammer can, prove to them, don't worry, now your investment's is actually growing profit. You've got some profit, you've got interest, you can get the money from the interest and the profits. Friends, folks, that's not what it's going to be. That's not the narrative. It's a massive lie. Okay, it's not like you're going to invest in some, company on what do they call that? Forex or something? Or trading, or you actually go down to a proper licensed broker to do trading and stuff. That's been registered with the government to do trading and stuff. But even for those of you who are listening to this, I may sound preachy to you. What I may not sound like, you're going to ruin people's money lending. I'm not here to ruin your business. I'm here to revive your conscience. If that is whether you have one or not, I don't know. I can't help you if you don't have a conscience. But the key part of it is that seeing so many, reading articles and all these things, how many of those suicide cases, folks, here, okay, let's talk about Singapore, maybe elsewhere in the world, that have been elderlies or young people who may have gotten themselves in debt because of scams and all these things, and they can't pay up, and now they're faced with creditors, from debtors hounding them, and they're like unable to pay up and all these things, and they have no home and all these things. What's going to happen? All right? I mean, in truth, folks, there must be more done for the Moneylenders Act of 2008 in Singapore. More safeguards, more checks and balances. And I've written this to I've written an email to, I believe, the Prime Minister's office. I think maybe I should write one to the Finance Minister. I know this is going to fall on deaf ears, because most of the time, those big politicians are like, who are you? Yeah, I'm a nobody, but the funny part of this nobody is that I'm also honest taxpayer. I pay my income tax and all these things. And the fact of the matter remains is that if you're not going to help these people, don't kind of say, oh, we have done it. There was nothing done to protect the vulnerable. Why would you it's like to say, okay, let me give you guys an analogy, okay? You have a farm, all right? You've got farm animals, you've got cows, you've got pigs, and you've got goats and all these things and rabbits, all right? But similarly, the cows, the goats, the chickens are all your people living in your country. Your acre of your land that you have, your boundary, is your country, right? And how do you defend your livelihood, which is your farm animals? You build a wall or a fence, right? And you put safeguards in. You put scarecrows to scare the crows, and for example, or you might put like barbed wire fence or electric fence to keep predators out of your farm. Similarly, a country builds or enacts laws and acts, to protect its own citizens. But what good is the act or the law if it is not sufficiently, effective? Okay, I'm going to be very fair about it. I'm going to be very diplomatic. What good is the law and the act if it is insufficiently effective to protect the citizens from scams? From them taking up unnecessary money loans to finance a scam. There isn't, right? I mean, if there isn't, when I say there isn't enough done. There isn't enough means and balances done, or checks and balances done to protect. And folks, it's not going to be the first and the last we're going to see of people doing foolish and crazy things like, suicide and all this. But a key part of it, folks, even if you're a young person listening to me rambling on, but I'm telling you the truth. We need more done. And if you're a lawmaker and you happen to be chancing YouTube and watching this, please, if you're in the finance industry, gather your colleagues, make the change now in 2026, right? Your Money Lending Act of 2008 is very outdated, okay? It's time to take action. The scammers are already using AI. And as a country, if you want to say, oh, we are developed and all these things, but how is the infrastructure? How is the foundation to support all of this? Where is the foundation? Where is the protection mechanisms? You can't simply say, you know what, I'm just going to build a little fence, right? Just as a formality to show that there is what I'm just doing, the kind of attitude like that will do. Like the that will do is not doing it properly or more robustly, but just saying, I'll just put just that bare minimum, that's it. Because I'm afraid to scare away investors and all these things. Well, you know what? To me, building a country is not just always about just strictly money, At the end of the day, when all these scams get out of hand, the only people that are suffering, right, the most are all your citizens who are paying all their taxes, their hard-earned tax dollars. Okay, and their boys and their daughters going to join the military, especially for Singapore, for 2 years or 2.5 years in the military. They have put their sons forward to serve the country, right? A human life. There's so much that can be done and accomplished. And so I beseech lawmakers, if you're listening to this, Singapore lawmakers, if you're listening to this, do something more to protect the elderly. Do something more to protect the young people and the vulnerable if they're being hooked on, if they've been hooked up by scams. There's no point in putting flyers, brochures, advertisements, phone warnings, and all these things. It's not enough when at the final line of it all, there isn't enough defense, there isn't enough protection for them. Right? I mean, the real, I'll just share this with you guys, the real helplessness is when you realize that even the act and the laws don't even protect you at all. Because at the end of the day, after that meeting with a family member and their lawyers, there is that level, that stage of utter helplessness that you find that they are winning and as a victim you're not. So the question becomes, where is the justice in that, right? Let me just say something out of the Pledge of Singapore: to build a democratic society based on justice and equality. Where's the justice in that? Where's the justice if your laws are not going to protect the vulnerable? Where's the justice in that? I'm not blaming Singapore's finance or the police because they're just following the protocol, right? Where is the justice when you have officers who would like to go further in their investigation, when the officers have to tell the police officers to tell the victims, sorry, you have to seek legal help because we don't deal with civil cases, we can't go any further. Well, while the perpetrators are happily counting the dollars that they're earning, right? I'm not trying to pinpoint who the perpetrator may be. Maybe a scammer from this country, from China, whatever. But the true thing of it is that these scammers are coming from overseas. And we need to have more protection, absolutely more. Not just 100%, 200% more. We need to get radical with the protection for elderly, as well as young and vulnerable and they're also immature. They don't even have experience to understand what's the consequences of taking loans and all these things. And especially when their only collateral is their house, folks. Think about it, all right? If their collateral is their house, why? Why would you want to conduct a loan? At the very least, if they're already at a certain age, it doesn't make any sense. What are you going to do? Start a Pokemon business or something? I just find that, there was a time when I felt like I was very nationalistic and patriotic. But never before in my entire existence have I ever felt that nationalistic and that kind of, patriotism. I'm not a patriot, right? I'm a person who just follows based on what I believe in a country that has good governance, proper governance. When I say proper governance, that means a wholesome protections mechanism to protect users, such as elderly people and kids. In this case, of the Money Lending Act of 2008. Anyways, I've been rambling for almost half an hour, but guys, comment below if you want, and if you wish to share to your colleagues and friends or your parents, even if they don't speak English, translate to them what I'm saying, okay? And for those of you young people, if you all ever come up to become ministers, and for those who are up and coming, up and rising, opposition party, or like you're going to be in the incumbent party, think about what I'm saying when you put acts and laws up, right? they should be very robust and wholesome to protect people. Otherwise, it's just a formality. Otherwise, it's just a fence. It's not going to stop the big bad wolf coming across the fence. Right? The wolf doesn't care about morals, ethics, and values and principles. All they care about is money, all right, or food, in essence, in the farm. So, folks, learn to understand that there will be times like these when we need to step up, when we need to think about how we're going to start protecting the vulnerable and elderly, and that even means how you're going to help your own household. Do something. Watch for the signs, as I previously talked in my videos before. Watch those videos. If I hadn't do a video about symptoms and all that, let me know. I'll come up with one to identify symptoms of scam victims as well. Yeah. So, anyways, Y2K signing off. Been rambling for 31 minutes. It's a lot of rambling, and sometimes I know that you guys are patient enough to sit through 31 minutes of listening. But I'll be honest, I don't just ramble for the sake of rambling it. I'm saying it because I feel that there should be more done. Ask yourself and touch your heart. Is there something more that you could have done in your life or create awareness across? All right. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you're just creating awareness. Well, at least you're doing something. You're not just sitting there hoping to do something, waiting for someone else to do. Of course, we would love if people like ourselves, if we see our family members or our loved ones going through such things, if we could make, upgrades to the act and the law, don't you think we would have done that? But we're not the lawmakers. We're not the institution. We don't get to decide those things, isn't it? It's tragic. It's sad. We talk about democracy and all these things, but the key part of it is even with the statistical numbers of scams that's happening across, there isn't enough to protect it. When I say protect, there isn't enough done to protect, our vulnerable groups. All right, guys, Y2K signing off. Take what I said, seriously. Food for thought. Think about it. You're a lawmaker. Do something about it. Do something. Government of Singapore, if you're hearing this, or make upgrades to the Money Lending Act. Okay, let's just sum up before I sign off. Number 1, have proper means testing. Check to make sure that the person actually has financial capability, to pay off the loans. They've got a job. Number 2, if it's like an elderly person, the collateral should not just be their house, because that's all they have. Do you want to make the elderly homeless? All right. Now that's beside the point. If someone, from the money lending, decide, but it's a business. Well, it's a business. Well, how about I reflect the whole thing back to you, and I put your company on the collateral, right? It's a pink slip to your house. Okay. If you lose that, where are you going to stay in? A tent? Right? So, in truth, let me be honest. All right. Number 2, aside from that, the house, should not, even elderly or a vulnerable person or a young person who probably inherited the house from their parents who passed and they would like to put their house up for collateral for the loans, that should not be permitted. All right. Because if the vulnerable person is servicing a scam, all right. Now, obviously, here's a gray area, folks. Obviously, if the victims knew it was a scam, they wouldn't have done it in the first place, right? But if they know it, if they finally realize it's a scam, the protection mechanism should be there to not allow them, to sell, to collateral, to sell their house, and when people put houses as collateral, it's so blackly dangerous. It's so risky. So absolutely no. That's number 2. Don't allow people to put their homes as collateral. And obviously, number 3, the question is, how are they going to get the loan then, right? Well, The key part of it is that they need to show that they're able to have monthly income somehow, whether from their pensions, whether from side job hustles. Maybe they're driving Uber, they're driving Grab, or they got jobs working in the coffee shop or McDonald's. There needs to be some income before you can service a loan, right? And the loan should be a very safe margin where the elderly will not lose, or the young person will not lose their home over their heads. If they want to take a loan using their house as collateral, you just need to make sure, okay, to be fair to the people who are running money lending businesses, okay? Actually, the question becomes, if you want to have that fairness applied to you, you need to be fair to the other party. Hey, fairness works both ways, It takes two hands to clap, right? So, you need to have, number 3, you need to have family members who are blood related, or somewhat related, extended family members who are related to the borrower, to vouch for them, to show that they know these people for a long time, right? And to actually talk to the vulnerable party and to double check that they are not servicing a scam, right? And number 4, the last but not least, if you want them to make, the act should also include that all of the means testing, credit bureau, credit card report, credits service report, all the reports, the pensions, income statements, and property tax or anything should all be laid out. Right? It's a lot of paperwork, yes, but we're doing due diligence. What's the harm in doing that for? Nothing. It would absolutely not be costing anything just to do your homework more than lend out the massive amount of money and to know that the person can pay you back, right? So I will start with those 4 first. So lawmakers of Singapore, politicians, citizens, if you're hearing this, right, try and get something done for the Moneylenders Act of 2008. Make some changes. God bless all of you. Y2K signing off. Wish you all safe and healthy. As always, take care.